The shepherd's sheep. Excuse me, I'm going to do my best to do this without coughing way more than I need to. While there do remain a handful of types of wild sheep, the vast majority of the sheep in the world today are domesticated. There are nearly 400 different breeds of domesticated sheep listed on Wikipedia. They are described as different enough to be considered a different species from the original wild sheep that helped form a part of their origin. Some may be bred for differing climates or to eat differing types of food, depending on that environment. Some are bred for wool, while others are bred to manage vegetation. Some are bred for their milk or for their meat. A few are bred just as a hobby, and still others are bred as a conservation effort to restore the numbers of native, ancient populations that have been nearly wiped out. One characteristic that all domesticated sheep share is the need for human care. They would all likely suffer and potentially die apart from some amount of personal involvement of a shepherd. As Christians, we each have our own sets of skills and abilities which make us important to the Good Shepherd. Ephesians 4:11 and 12. And he gave some apostles and some prophets and some evangelists and some pastors and teachers for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ. Now that's not to say that the ministry are the only important responsibilities in the church. 1 Corinthians 12:7 through 11. But the manifestation of the Spirit is given to every man to profit withal. For to one is given by the Spirit the word of wisdom, to another the word of knowledge by the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healing by the same Spirit, to another working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another discerning of spirits, to another diverse kinds of tongues, to another interpretation of tongues. But all these work at that one and selfsame Spirit, dividing to every man severally as he will. We each have our place in the fold, and we're each individually responsible to find that place and then fulfill it to the best of our ability by the help and direction of the shepherd. Colossians 3:17. And whatsoever ye do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God and the Father by Him. Sheep are mentioned in the Bible more than any other animal, over 500 times. In fact, a sheep is over a year old. A lamb is less than a year. Sheep are able to reproduce while lambs are not. Sheep are especially important to the Bible, the people of the Bible. They were part of their sacrificial system as well as their wealth. The world in which we live is industrialized, abounding in technology. Our current generations have difficulty relating to simple things such as land, crops, livestock, and harvests. Only a relatively small percentage can say that they have ever had the responsibility of raising cattle, sheep, or even a garden. But because we live in such a different time, it's hard to imagine the life of a shepherd and his sheep. But the Bible is full of simple yet meaningful thoughts just like this. It tells of people who lived off the land, raised their crops and cared for their animals, and which were acutely aware that they were dependent on God for their daily livelihood. Now this is something that has almost faded into obscurity at this point in time. The world would have us to believe that we are absolutely independent in and among ourselves. In this country, one of the most important historical documents is the Declaration of Independence. It describes the time when this fledgling nation declared independence from her mother country of England. And it would seem that many in this country have since declared their independence from the God who purchased their freedom from sin. They cling to their own destruction rather than rejoicing in the freedom which was won for us on Calvary. The despotic tyranny of King George in the early days of this nation pale in comparison to the eternal flames of Satan's hellfire. Yet souls flock to the shores of their own destruction rather than submitting to the one who desires to supply for their every need. They remain ignorant of the eventual outcome of their chosen path. It is God who has granted us all that we need to survive in this world. God has supplied them with the very reason and logic that they use to try to convince themselves that He doesn't exist. When souls claim independence from God, they cut themselves off from the hope and safety that He has provided. We must first understand our own full dependence on God, then help to lead others to that same knowledge through our faithful service to God. From the first shepherd all the way through the biblical record, sheep were raised in a personal way, allowing relationships to be built. Many times a shepherd raised several generations of offspring stemming from his original flock. Symbolically, the Word of God uses sheep as an analogy for God's people. If God compares us to sheep, it only makes sense that we learn and understand all we can about them, both positive and negative. Why? So that we can more fully be what He would have us to be and train up future generations to obediently follow after Him as well. Now, although the Bible is a historical record, it represents the many and varied ways in which humanity has interacted with the God who created them. It only covers a small geographical region of the earth. Yet the behavior we see is typical of humans generally in all places and throughout all times. Through the pages of the Bible, we have a God's eye view of human nature. We can witness the outcome of many differing attitudes in individuals. Now, this series that we're in is about sheep, but as humans, we're the only living creatures capable of learning from the mistakes of others. While this is true in concept, the reality would often lead us to believe otherwise. How often have we heard or even said ourselves, "That would never happen to me"? For example, Jesus said in Luke 18, verses 10 through 14, 2 men went up into the temple to pray, the one a Pharisee and the other a publican. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, "God, I thank Thee that I'm not as other men are, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this publican. I fast twice in the week. I give tithes of all that I possess." And the publican, standing afar off, would not lift up so much as his eyes unto heaven, but smote upon his breast, saying, "God, be merciful to me, a sinner." I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For every one that exalteth himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. Now I have a question. How many of you, while I read that account, thought within yourselves, "Boy, I'm glad I'm not like that Pharisee"? If you did, then you've fallen into the exact same trap he did. Being a Christian is never about comparing our goodness to others. It's about comparing ourselves to Christ. The Pharisee was proud to be unlike the publican. But the publican was only concerned with his own weakness in comparison to God. When we fully understand this, we'll be better equipped to train up others in the way and the will of God. It seems clear that the majority of those who would call themselves Christians have missed this point. It isn't our responsibility to think ourselves better than others are, but it's our responsibility to help everyone to understand what it means to serve God faithfully by being the examples whom He would have us to be, just like the publican. As we learn about literal sheep, we take note of their characteristics and consider why we as Christians are referred to as sheep rather than wolves or some other ferocious animal. The golden truth, Psalms 95 and 7, "For He is our God, and we are the people of His pasture and the sheep of His hand." Commentary Part 1, the characteristics of sheep. There are many things which could be said about sheep. As we cover their qualities, we'll stop briefly to discuss some of the similarities between sheep and Christians. Excuse me. Part A, follow the leader. For their safety and protection, sheep in general must be led. The majority of sheep are followers. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths." Following the shepherd requires trusting him. This trust comes through the relationship that we share with him. Now, the author of this lesson said that the majority of sheep are followers. That doesn't mean that some sheep are leaders. It only means that sometimes sheep choose not to follow. This can become a problem when one sheep decides to go in a different direction from the flock. Often other sheep will simply follow whoever decides to move in a particular direction. Without a shepherd to keep everyone moving in the right direction, problems will quickly arise. Sadly, we can see similar behavior in humans. This has led to all manner of difficulties, including some being cut off from the fold as a direct result of following someone who led them astray. It's critical that we recognize the voice of the Good Shepherd, not only for our own sake, but for the sake of those around us as well. Part B, enjoy fellowship. Sheep are naturally social animals. They enjoy fellowship with other sheep. We are to have the same mindset and should enjoy the company of other Christians as well. In a scientific study, it was found that sheep can recognize familiar faces of both humans and other sheep after 2 years of separation. Though some consider sheep dumb, the study mentioned in this section helps show that sheep are intelligent. Jesus told the early church, "Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves." That's Matthew 10 and 16. Now, sheep don't have big claws or sharp teeth to fend off predators. Being social animals is one of sheep's only forms of defense. There's safety in numbers. The more sheep are around, the harder it will be for the enemy to come in and to begin to cause destruction. The close-knit society of a church environment is designed to help us fend off the advances of the enemy. The better our relationships within the local congregation, the better we can help to be on the lookout for signs of the approach of our common adversary. Working to win the lost, we will inevitably find ourselves in situations where we must use godly wisdom so as not to entangle ourselves in the affairs of this present world. Part 2, different stages and ages of sheep. Part A, care of lambs. Since they lose body heat quickly, protection from the cold for a newborn lamb is essential. Comparatively, no Christian should be allowed to grow cold. We must get back to working with people to help them become and remain established. Young people particularly are full of energy and excitement. This enthusiasm can help protect them from growing cold when harnessed for good use for Christ and the church by organizing them for work in the Gleaner Band, Victory Leaders Band, and youth life teams. What a difference just a few young people can make to a local church. What can we do to keep and gain more youth? One thing we can do is begin teaching them how to really study their Bibles. Why not hold monthly or even weekly Bible studies to encourage them? Give them assignments to work on. Challenge them to memorize passages of Scripture. Take them out into the community on Sunday afternoons to local nursing home or homes of shut-ins and hold Sunday school extension classes. It requires work and dedication on all of our parts to keep everyone interested, learning, and growing. The results will be worth it as the lambs remain in the flock and grow up to become solid, well-established sheep. Part B, care of sheep. Jesus wants all of his sheep taken care of, no matter what their ages. Sheep, like people, have individual personalities and certain strengths and weaknesses, likes and dislikes. Comparing sheep to a typical congregation, most pastors have to be skilled at reaching out to people of all ages. Now, something we all need to remember is that according to 1 Corinthians 12 and 18, but now hath God set the members, every one of them in the body, as it hath pleased him. We don't get to pick and choose. But it's our responsibility to find God's will and submit ourselves to it. This not only applies to the membership, but to the pastor as well. Just because he's a pastor doesn't mean he can do whatever he wants. He is responsible to find God's will when it comes time for appointments as well. The local shepherd should have the best interest of the flock in mind. By doing so, God's will can be accomplished, and the flock will grow both spiritually and numerically as a result. We are all responsible to play our part. Though lambs, as they grow, are full of energy to be burned, sheep of every age need exercise to maintain good health. Most people want and need to feel useful. We might be surprised to know what talents and abilities many among us possess. Sheep have some talents. They produce a popular oil known as lanolin, as well as wool, which is the most widely used animal fiber. Wool has been used for centuries for all sorts of useful things. However, it can cause problems for the sheep if he does not give it away frequently enough. For instance, the fleece can become very heavy on the sheep. The prevention and remedy for this is for the sheep to be sheared. When that fleece becomes heavy, there's potential for the sheep to fall over, literally. And if the fleece is too heavy, they may not be able to get back up to their feet in order to feed. And they can actually starve to death for the heaps of wool piled up on their bodies if it's not sheared regularly. Wool-bearing sheep must have their coats removed yearly, sometimes twice a year. As they give of their wool, it continues to grow. Now, don't our talents work in much the same way? One problem humans often have with our talents is that those talents can cause our egos to be inflated if the source of those talents is not properly acknowledged. Just as sheep grow heavy with their unsheared fleeces, the human ego can grow so large that the individual may become suffocated by pride. By regularly acknowledging the source of our talents, we greatly reduce the risk of being spiritually destroyed by pride. It is far better to humble ourselves than to run the risk of destruction or humiliation as a result of our increased pride. Another aspect of wool is that it can become embedded with briars, mud, sticks, leaves, etc. In the same way, our lives can attract all types of things that need to be shaken off, things that can cause us to be pushed over if we carry them around. If we allow the Holy Ghost to regularly apply the Word of God to our lives, He will help rid us of the things that weigh us down, just like the clippers in the hands of those sheep shearers. But it's not enough simply to sit under the ministry of the pastor on Sunday or Sunday school teacher once a week. We must set aside time each week, during every day, to dig deep into God's Word for ourselves. We need to understand the culture that we read about in the Bible so that we can see how the lessons apply to our modern lives. As we begin to recognize the parallels, we will begin to slowly draw closer to the Good Shepherd, and we will more clearly see His desires for our daily lives. This time we spend in the presence of God each day will strengthen our relationships with Him and with each other within the flock. Not just anyone can shear a sheep. In order to prevent cuts and injuries to the sheep, the shearing of wool must be done by someone skilled. If an untrained individual attempts this process, not only may the sheep be injured, but the shearer himself may be as well. In this world, there are many sources which claim association with the Good Shepherd. However, very few of them are 100% accurate. Some may have a large percentage of good and beneficial information. Yet all too often it's that small percentage of misinformation which will cause the sheep to stumble and fall. In Genesis 3 and 5, Satan said, "For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." Now, everything he said in this verse is absolutely true. Satan may be a liar, but he strategically incorporates truth into his lies. We must be thoroughly grounded in the fullness of God's Word before we begin to seek sources outside of the fold. There is much good information out there, but if we're not careful, we will fall into that same trap. If we can't separate the truth from the lies, we also will be deceived. Part C, lost sheep and lambs. Matthew 18 and 12. How think ye? If a man have 100 sheep, and one of them be gone astray, doth he not leave the 99 and goeth into the mountains, and seeketh that which is gone astray? In the Middle East there were open fields for grazing rather than hedges and fences. Because of this, the shepherd was responsible for laying out the boundaries for the sheep. In the West, people have been so accustomed to seeing hedges and fences that serve the same purpose of keeping the sheep in and other grazing sheep and other grazing animals in, and those dangerous predators out. In each manner, specific boundaries are laid out. No matter how clear the boundaries, sometimes sheep wander. The shepherd will repeatedly retrieve them and return them to the flock. There are times, though, when certain sheep will not be stopped regardless of the number of times the shepherd brings them home. There are some firm methods used by shepherds to prevent sheep from habitually straying. One such way is to apply a yoke, which would be a forked branch or two crossed pieces of wood, to the neck of the sheep to keep them from continually breaking through hedges and fences. Well, that only works if you have hedges and fences. Matthew 11:29, take my yoke upon you and learn of me. When we take the yoke of the Spirit of God, He will lead us in pleasant paths. He will direct us through difficult valleys. He will strengthen us when the path grows steep, and He will encourage us when we grow weary. He will show us the best way. And if we begin to deviate, He will draw us back to that good path. All of this depends on our full cooperation and our absolute surrender to His will. If we retain the right to rebel against His authority, it will not work out so pleasantly for us in the end. He knows the best way, and He will not lead us into danger unnecessarily. If He does, you can be sure that it will work out to our benefit, and it will increase our faith in Him. A shepherd recalled a true story from his own experiences with a persistent wanderer. He said he had a sheep named Jack who constantly strayed away from the flock, putting himself in harm's way. Again and again he went after Jack and brought him back. Nothing the shepherd did would deter him from running away. Finally, for the sheep's own safety, the shepherd did something used only in extreme circumstances. It pained him. He took his rod, placed it under Jack's leg, and carefully broke the bone. He then set the bone, placing his beloved sheep across his shoulders, carrying him for the next several weeks until the bone healed. Once he recovered, Jack was the most devoted sheep the shepherd ever had. Psalms 19 and 67 paints a vivid picture. Before I was afflicted, I went astray, but now have I kept thy word. The discipline was not done in anger nor in vengeance, but out of love and concern for the sheep's welfare. Another shepherd's story is similar, but with a far more difficult outcome. The sheep could not be deterred. She taught the other sheep to stray, and when she had her own lambs, they learned by her example. Unable to control her through any means, the shepherd finally did the only thing he could, and she fed his family. Both stories are true and very reflective of the lives which some people have chosen to live. Correction is almost always painful. Some stray, but through compassionate correction, they're changed forever. Others, through stubbornness, refuse to come under God's authority, plunging headlong into the abyss of sin and death. O Lord, are not thine eyes upon the truth? Thou hast stricken them, but they have not grieved. Thou hast consumed them, but they have refused to receive correction. They have made their faces harder than a rock. They have refused to return. Jeremiah 5 and 3. The Bible shows that disobedience requires that correction be applied with loving kindness, long-suffering, and much prayer. God is very patient, but He's also just, and there is most certainly a day of judgment coming. The conclusion of this lesson: today's lesson has shown a few of the many facets of the shepherd's sheep. Not only does the shepherd have responsibilities, but the sheep do as well. As the shepherd lead, the sheep must follow. It is said that sheep require more care than any other livestock. In the literal as well as the spiritual, raising and tending sheep requires a huge investment of time. It's costly to raise them, and there is a big potential for loss. For those who love sheep, though, the benefits far outweigh the risks. Are you invested in the sheep market?